Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 19th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services, cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
Hello, this is James Brown, the Godfather of Soul. I feel good. You're checking out my man, Mike Siegel. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy.
Welcome back in, folks. Good to have you with us as we get into hour number 3 on the Kuhner Report. It's a pleasure to be here today. And we are joined by a gentleman who has a wealth of background on free market ideas. Dr. Merrill Matthews is the resident scholar at the Institute for Policy Innovation. They're based in Dallas. And as I said, they believe in the free market concepts that have made this country great, which are attempted to be stolen from us by the far left. Dr. Matthews, it's a pleasure. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Let me turn, first of all, to a piece done by the president of your organization, the Institute for Policy Innovation, about Paul Ryan and the troubling nature of the filibuster. As he points out, Tom Giovannetti, your president, twice in the last 3 years, a Republican is voluntarily leaving the speakership. Now, if you think about that, the speakership is the third most powerful position in the country. How do I know that? Because as we know, when the succession occurs, it goes from president to vice president to Speaker of the House.
Right.
So he has enormous power in that regard. But as happened with Boehner, and I realize that many people criticize both Ryan and Boehner for terrible budgets and deficits and all of that, and maybe there's some legitimacy to that point. But it's also true that the House has passed a whole range of bills. I don't know, Ryan gave it in the dozens of bills that have been passed in the House that just sit around and flounder on Mitch McConnell's desk, either because he won't bring it to the floor or he can't get the votes. My view would be bring it to the floor, make them vote officially on the record so that then the voters know how people voted and can make changes in the Senate. But the 60-vote majority required to end debate on an issue to get to a vote has been the big problem, according to the president of your organization. And that's why Ryan is leaving. Is that the case, do you think?
Well, I think there's several reasons why Ryan is leaving, but yes, he has certainly moved a fair amount of legislation through the House, including the 12 appropriations bills, which essentially by law you do the 12 appropriations bills. Those fund the various aspects of the government. They're supposed to go to the Senate. The Senate votes on each of the 12, and then assuming they pass, they go to the president. But they haven't been able to do that for years. The House voted on it. Mitch McConnell never took up those 12 appropriation bills, which led us to the $1.3 trillion budget deal in March. So Ryan has managed to move a lot of things through. The process is easier in the House. So what Tom Giovannetti, the president of IPI, was talking about is the problem of the Senate filibuster that we have right now. It's a filibusters have been around for a good while. They weren't initially with the Senate, but they go back to Aaron Burr wanting to have some kind of process to slow things down. But the Senate filibuster that we know today is really from 1975, where they created what they called a virtual filibuster, where you don't have to stand up and talk and hold the floor as we did in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You can just say, I'm opposed to that, and they have to get the cloture vote to be able to move something. And on a lot of these issues, it's hard to do it.
Well, it's a big problem because, look, we could have had Medicare reform, the entitlement programs that Paul Ryan is big on. I mean, he's wanted entitlement reform. I mean, that's where 70% of the budget goes, Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal entitlement programs of that kind. We could have had reform there. We could have had options for people to invest in mutual funds or other kinds of vehicles for their retirement money. If they had chosen to do that. That's not happened, obviously. Obamacare could have been replaced and repealed, period. But all of that, even the balanced budget idea, has been gone by the boards because of the Senate and its filibuster. And so it's a state of paralysis. But, you know, one of the problems is, and the founders, as you point out with Aaron Burr, but Alexander Hamilton, who was sort of a big government guy, he said, it's very interesting. He said with a supermajority requirement, in effect, the majority loses its majority position, that the minority gets the power transferred to it because it can stop the majority from doing what the majority want. So now the minority have the power to stop what it doesn't want. That shouldn't be the way a free society works.
That's right. And what happened was that they, as I mentioned, it wasn't in the initial. Hamilton pointed that out, and that's exactly right. And you have the you take us, but the filibuster through the 1800s, as it began to develop, was very rarely used, and it really wasn't used much even after Woodrow Wilson made some changes to it and so forth in order to be able to get his stuff through. It didn't really take off until after that 1975 legislation. But you know, just on some of the, just to put one caveat to what you said, Obamacare, the Obamacare repeal could only get 49 votes. So it wasn't the filibuster that stopped it because they were moving through the reconciliation process. It was Republicans in the Senate who stopped it. So you would almost surely have more things get through, but you'd still have, if Republicans in the Senate weren't willing to pass some of these things, they would get blocked up. And even right now, Ryan's talking about another tax cut package, and Mitch McConnell, head of the Senate, has said, I'm not interested in bringing that up.
Well, you know, and that's unfortunate. McConnell's one of the problems in the Congress today. But the fact is that you're right. They only got 49 votes to repeal Obamacare in the Senate. But what if there had not been the filibuster rule? You know, because people could vote that way and say, well, look, we weren't going to get it anyway because you need 60 votes. Mm-hmm. But if it had been a case of a majority, you know what kind of pressure there would have been on those one or two other Republicans to relentlessly relent on that and go for it, because if you only need 51 votes, actually you would need one more, and then the vice president could get the 51st vote to break a tie.
Right, so, and that's where they were hoping they would get. But.
Yeah, so there was no argument to be made, because if you couldn't get to 60, you weren't going to get it anyway, so the fact that it was 49 made no difference, and those Republicans could hold that. But they would have been put in a position of enormous pressure if all you needed was one more vote and the vice president. I mean, that's my view.
There are a number of Republicans, including the president, who've called for an end to the filibuster. I don't think we're not actually doing that here at IPI. We're saying if you want to have a filibuster, let's go back to the position where you've got to get the floor on the Senate. You have to hold the floor. You're free to talk as long as you want to, be that 12 hours, 24 hours, or however long. There might be some process where you can let somebody else take over for you in the talking, but you got to stand there and do something. Right now, what they have is the lazy man's filibuster, where they just call the office and say, I'm not going to do that, and nothing happens.
Well, and by the way, it could have happened if McConnell had chosen to just get rid of the filibuster rule. It's a rule. It's not ingrained in the Constitution. It's not ingrained in federal statute. It's simply a rule of the Senate, and Harry Reid got rid of it for the nomination or approval of judges on the Senate's role to approve judges. He did it at the federal district court level and the federal appeals court level, not at the Supreme Court level, but he did it at the other two levels. So then McConnell felt he could do it at the Supreme Court level because the first two levels of the federal courts were done by Reid, his opponent. So then he said, I'm going to do it at the Supreme Court level as well. So now that's done. But what's to stop McConnell from saying, as Giovannetti points out in the piece, we're going to get rid of the filibuster rule, as the president has proposed? And, of course, it's not his branch of government, but he likes the idea of getting rid of it. McConnell could do that, couldn't he?
It's called Rule 22, and I don't think he could, because he would have to get at least 50 Republican votes, and there are several Republicans who don't want to see that rule ended. So I don't think I think there's little chance that he would be able to get 50 votes to do that, just because there's several, John McCain and several others, who wouldn't want to do it.
Well, but then you get back to the point, McCain would be an obstacle. He always is. But then you can get to the point where if it actually came up as a serious matter and the American people had the ability to pressure their senators on this issue because they're fed up with not getting anything done because you need this supermajority, some of those senators might relent. And even some Democrats. I mean, Claire McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Manchin. I mean, they're in risky districts, risky states, I should say, running statewide as Senate. and you might very well get some of those people to go along with it.
It's possible. I'm dubious that they'd be able to get the 50 votes that they need for it with the people that they have in the Senate right now. That may change at some point, but I don't see those votes there.
Well, the truth is, though, Dr. Matthews, that one senator can hold up an entire bill and make it go away by just simply. And we had remember Ted Cruz, I think, and Rand Paul both held it up for days by just reading the phone book or reading Dr. Seuss or whatever it may be. It's totally ludicrous what you can do in order to stop progress from happening.
And at least what Rand Paul did several years ago when he was, I think, was he up 12, 14 hours, something like that?
Yep.
At least he was, he got a lot of attention. He brought attention to, and this had to do with, if I remember right, President Obama being able to kill U.S. citizens overseas, and he was trying to oppose that through drone strikes and things of that nature. But he brought attention to it, and he achieved what he wanted to do. The White House said they would talk about it, and so there you have a slowing down of the process, but you don't have a stopping of the process. And what you have right now is a stopping of the process.
Yeah, and that's what's impeding getting anything done. So you think that's one of the reasons Ryan is leaving, is that he's fed up with the filibuster rule and he can't get anything done even after the House passes legislation.
And then he gets an awful lot of blame for nothing getting done.
Well, that's true. He could also be preparing for 2024 to run for president. You never know.
Yeah, it could be. I don't get the impression. Well, we'll just see. He may. But, it's interesting because even on the Obamacare repeal, the House passed Obamacare repeal twice, I think. They couldn't get it through the Senate. So he takes the blame for some of this, and yet he managed to get through the House. So you can see where there would be a fair amount of frustration there.
All right, let me turn to one that you knew was coming, because government wants to get its tentacles into your pocket every way it can, anytime it can. Mm-hmm. And now the Supreme Court has heard a case that would be a landmark case. It is a landmark case based on what the court decides with regard to internet sales tax. They've now heard earlier this week oral arguments in this case. It's called South Dakota versus Wayfair. Mm-hmm. And basically what could happen if the court decides this way is that states could force businesses in other states to collect internet sales taxes for them. So in other words, if I'm in Mississippi and I buy an item from a company in Chicago on the internet, that company in Chicago, Illinois, would have to charge me sales tax, which presumably would go to the Mississippi state government because I'm a resident of Mississippi buying something from out of state. and then they would have to the company would have to collect the tax and send it to the state of Mississippi. Is that what this would do?
Well, this goes back to a 1992 case called Quill versus North Dakota, and that particular case was about mail orders, because it was back in 1992. And the question came about is, if I live in one state and I'm ordering something from another state, does that other company in another state have to collect either sales tax in its state or in my state? And the Supreme Court said, no, you have to have what's called a nexus, that is a presence in the state where the purchaser resides. And so this has been an issue ever since, especially as online shopping has exploded. Amazon used to be opposed to this collection, but now they actually have warehouses in almost every state. So they're generally for it because that's the biggest seller, and they have a physical presence in almost every state. So if I go I live in Texas, if I go on Amazon, I say, I want to buy this new product here, I'm almost certainly going to be charged sales tax. As it turns out, about 80% of the possible sales taxes that could be collected, according to the Government Accountability Office, are actually collected now because of the way it's set up. So they get almost all the revenue that the states do that they would get. But your point is absolutely right. What this would do is, if the Supreme Court changes or overturns the Quill decision, it would in essence allow another state to impose taxes on me, and I would have no recourse because I don't have any way to vote on those politicians in other states that are taxing me.
So then would that tax then be received by the state you reside in, or by the state from which you bought the product in another state?
I think that's maybe up in the air right now because it depends upon which way they go on it. Now, right now, most states have a sales tax, and under virtually every state, they have the flip side of the sales tax is called a use tax. And what that means, Texas doesn't have an income tax. We have a larger state sales tax. If I go out and buy something from another state, I am supposed to pay the taxes to the state of Texas. The sales taxes. So if I buy something from another state, I'm supposed to let the state know and pay them the appropriate sales tax on that. Now, virtually nobody does that, and the state doesn't track it. Ironically, the lieutenant governor of Texas 9 or 10 years ago, David Dewhurst, bought something like $1.3 million worth of furniture from overseas, antique furniture. The state was able to see that. They knew it was coming in, so they went and actually imposed the sales tax, the use tax on him, and it shocked him because he didn't know there was such a thing as a use tax. So there is a use tax right now, but almost nobody pays it.
Well, the thing to me is, it goes back to the point that the tax originally, and as I understood it, would be because you had a brick and mortar store. We didn't have the internet in those days, right. And that you paid sales tax, and that money would help pay for the cost of paving the roads in front of the store, sweeping the streets with the public employee being paid to do that, picking up litter, all of the elements of having an actual physical presence that requires government to be there to help pay for the cost of your business being there. So there was a legitimate, as you say, nexus or connection between government collecting the tax and maintaining the neighborhood properly for your business to operate effectively. But now we're talking about it being hyperspace. So somebody may have a warehouse in some place that in some of the western states where there's wide open land, they build these warehouses, and all the people in those warehouses do is pick the products and ship them. But there's not the same kind of need for if you're physically in the state with that warehouse, then yeah, maybe there is a justification for the sales tax to pay for the cost of the public sector taking care of that neighborhood. But if you're in another state and you don't have a presence physically in the state, why should why should that state be able to get sales tax from you when you're not costing them any money?
Well, that's the question before the Supreme Court, and they are arguing. The arguments are that it's unfair to brick and mortar businesses because they have to pay the sales tax. And going back to your previous question, typically this is assumed that the company in the other state would collect the sales tax. If I'm buying something from somebody in another state, they would collect the Texas sales tax and send it to them. There are, if I remember right, about 7,000. Because it's not just the state sales tax, it's also community. Sometimes you have city and county sales taxes, and I think there's either 7,000 or 9,000 sales tax jurisdictions out there. And one of the questions had always been, how do you take a small company out there that just sells a little bit here and there, or a mom and pop and store, or they're just selling something, and how do you force them to know what that sales tax is going to be on me in Texas, and then collect it, and then they have to send a check to my state? And then the real problem, what we think would really happen in this, is that the various states would then start trolling around other states to various companies saying, we don't think you're paying us enough tax, we're going to audit you. So you, living in one state, could be audited by another state and be forced to pay some taxes that you may or may not agree with to that other state because they didn't think you were collecting the taxes in your business correctly. I mean, this is a nightmare.
That's why when government gets involved, it's a boondoggle, it's a bureaucracy, it's a mess. It's going to cost these small businesses who now can operate in several states because their product can be shipped. Now they're going to wind up having all this bureaucracy. It's another suppression of free enterprise on particularly small business. Look, large corporations can deal with it. Smaller businesses cannot, and it's another suppression of small business by implementing this tax requirement and having them have to administer it. We'll come right back with Dr. Merrill Matthews, Institute for Policy Innovation. We're going to get into the subject of teachers. We have Arizona and Kentucky as among other states where teachers are getting underpaid severely. Teachers are walking out. They're fed up. What do we do about the problem of teachers and their salaries? Mike Siegel in for Jeff Kuhner at the Kuhner Report. Much more coming at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel in. Dr. Merrill Matthews is here. We appreciate his taking the time to talk to us about several important issues we face. Another issue affecting taxpayers, all of this so far affecting taxpayers, but this one is a big one. It's public school teachers who deserve to be paid properly. They have an important job. We understand that. And there's always the complaint that they're underpaid. And in several states across this country, that's become a big issue now. I mentioned Arizona and Kentucky, other states as well. Dr. Matthews, one of the points your organization is making is that it's not that we don't have enough money in the public school system. We're spending on an average across the country $11,392 per student per year. But the problem is how we allocate those funds. Way too much to administrators, not enough to teachers.
That certainly seems to be the case. Benjamin Scafidi wrote a piece for the Friedman Foundation, that's named after Milton Friedman, Friedman Foundation for Educational Choice. His first segment of this was 3 or 4 years ago, so he just updated it here recently. And he's looking between 1950 and 2015, the growth in students, and what's happened is, if you take students as 100%, administrators and all other staff increased at 7 times the rate of students. So at 700, he's got it 709% over those years, whereas teachers increased by 243%. So we've got more teachers, some smaller classes, but the administrators, Mike, it is unbelievable. In Texas, we have nearly one person administration, whether you're talking about in the administrative office or doing other various things, versus one teacher. I mean, it's nearly a 1-to-1 ratio of teacher to administrator.
It's absurd, and it's unfortunate, and it's got to change. I know that we have salaries in South Dakota, $42,000 is the low, but it's also a lower cost of living. New York is $77,000, almost $78,000, which is a much higher cost of living. So we're adjusted for that. But here's the problem. The left wing in this country and the media, which is part of the left-wing radicalism, try to portray this as callous insensitivity by legislatures not caring about teachers versus being sympathetic and giving teachers raises, when the real issue is too many administrators get too much money, and that money should be reallocated back to the teachers in the classroom. But the left wing doesn't want to look at it that way, do they?
They never do. I mean, whenever you hear these stories, Oklahoma had a situation similar here just recently. It's always portrayed as the stingy state legislators who don't want to give teachers raises versus the teachers. And the teachers do a walkout, and I don't even hear the teachers actually talking about that. Maybe that's because they hope to be an administrator at some point or something. But you've got such a large number of administrators. They tend to be, not all of them, but a good portion of them tend to be fairly high-income people. And so much money goes to that, and it's not actually going to the teachers. I've actually heard of private schools where the teacher, the number of administrators is actually very small compared to the number of teachers, but that's not what you have in the public schools.
Well, we're going to keep an eye on this issue. I'm a former public school teacher myself, and it's frankly outrageous that it's been portrayed that way when the money is there. It's just that these people in the administrative levels get paid off, and there are too many of them. Dr. Matthews, always great to talk to you. I appreciate your time. Institute for Policy Innovation does great work for free market thinkers. Thank you for being on the program, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Have a great day, and I appreciate your time. Coming up to 2:31, we come back with Bridget Gabriel at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
WRKO, the Voice of Boston.
We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel here, in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. Always a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to speak with Bridget Gabriel. And we're delighted to have her here. Act for America is the organization she founded. And she's very concerned, as we've been talking about throughout the day, about stopping the left's war on America. The agenda that they have is frankly outrageous. Ms. Gabriel, nice to talk to you again. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. I'm delighted to be back with you.
Well, you should feel honored because apparently I think it's the Southern Poverty Law Center that thinks you're an enemy of this country. So congratulations. It's good to be on their enemies list.
Well, actually, they don't even care about this country. They just consider me an enemy of their leftist ideology, and therefore, because they cannot argue with my facts, they call me names like white supremacist and an Islamophobe. And of course, for the listeners who have never seen me, I am neither white nor a supremacist. I actually come from the Middle East, but thank you. I do consider it an honor.
I appreciate your being here as well. Let's turn to this problem that we've been talking about throughout the day. We had David Horowitz here earlier, because there is not so far, and this is the frustration I hear from my audience, and you point this out, that non-leftists have not come up with a way as an antidote to the horrifying messages coming from the far left wing. We need to be more aggressive, more assertive, and more effective in neutralizing their attacks on Western civilization. What do you make of that?
Exactly, because the left, they want the whole world to be one. They want to unify the world. Everybody is better than America. They have a beef with America. They have a beef with how prosperous we are, how successful we are, how better lifestyles that we have than the rest of the world. And they basically hate the foundation, which is America and everything that America has founded upon. The left has been brainwashing children for decades, and suddenly now we are realizing and seeing the lack of young people being patriotic, loving this nation. As a matter of fact, they are embarrassed of this nation. They have not been educated about its founding, its laws, and the tremendous strides it made for humanity, not just for Americans. America influenced the whole world. And this is exactly why, Mike, what makes people like Dinesh D'Souza, who's an immigrant to this great country from India, and people like me, and when we speak about our patriotism and why we love America, when Dinesh made his movie, America, Imagine a World Without Her, this is why it struck a chord with the patriotic, loving people in the United States, because they realized we need more people bragging and being proud about America and what it has to offer. And these are the voices that we need to magnify and suppress the left who despise this country.
That's a big part of the problem, because they're the tail wagging the dog, Ms. Gabriel. We had clearly the vast majority of counties across this country elect Donald Trump to drain that swamp, as we say, to bring back honor to this country, the sovereignty to this country, having legal immigration, not illegal immigration, getting rid of trade agreements and dealing one-on-one with countries in the way it should have been in the first place. But we haven't been doing that. And he's fighting the entire coordinated effort of that bureaucracy, which is battling against mainstream America. But, I cited earlier in the program a new book out from AP that's supposed to go to the classrooms about how white Christians are typically suburban or rural, are Islamophobic, are racist, are not accepting of people of different backgrounds. I mean, they want to teach this stuff in the schools. It's becoming an indoctrination program in America to avoid the very traditional greatness of the strength that made this country what it is today.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, my organization, Act for America, and I encourage people to go to our website, actforamerica.org, we put out a full report about what's happening in our school systems. We analyzed 38 textbooks taught in public schools and private schools nationwide, because let's face it, the State Board of Education decides what book the children are taught. And what we found out that the mistruth, the lies, the misrepresentation of fact, the whitewashing of history, basically, was amazing. And this did not start yesterday. This has been happening for decades. And this is exactly what I go back to. By the way, the report is free of charge. You can print it. You can download it. We've got a summary that's 30 pages. We've got a full report that's 220 pages. If you know a teacher, you can send them the link so they can read what's happening in our school system. And it is shocking. But again, here's what's been happening. See, the older people like you and I who remember America 30 and 40 years ago, who remember the greatness of America, understand what America offers the world. The new generation of today, who were raised with cell phones in their hands, with cable television, they can watch 500 cable channels on DirecTV or whatever, Verizon Fios, whatever that they have, take it for granted the privileges that they have in America. Most of them have not traveled abroad. Most of them do not understand how people in other countries live. Like I discussed in my article, I wish I can take people to different parts of the world to see those people who call us racist and uncaring and selfish. I wish I could show them how most people live around the world. When you go, for example, to Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, and many other countries around the world, people live in ways that in America we consider unacceptable. Even the poorest of the poor in America, people who live on welfare, have cell phones, have heating and air conditioning in their public housing, they have dishwasher, they have washer dryer, and this is what we consider poverty. They need to go and see how the rest of the world lives in shacks. And this is why we need to start teaching the children in America, be proud of your country, stand up for your country. We actually also, Mike, need to start encouraging the adults who are afraid of their shadow to speak up in defense of this country when they are talking with their friend, the leftist, at dinner parties. I cannot tell you how many friends of mine who are conservatives, who love this country, but they do not want to create wave, and they want to, may be friends with their friends, the left, who put this country down and start berating Donald Trump and how bad America is at dinner parties. And my friends keep their mouths shut because, well, we don't want to start an argument. Why? Stand up for the country. And I hope that Americans who are listening to me right now, no matter where you are, I'm an immigrant that came to America. America is God's gift to the universe. We're not perfect. No country in the world is perfect. But we are as close to perfection as you can come to on this earth. Stand up and fight for this country because there is no country like her.
Well, but the thing that people have to understand is that they're trying to change the fabric of this nation by bringing in people illegally. You talk often about jihadism and all of that as a major problem for America, that there's still that attack possibility and potential, that it's an ongoing problem, and we have to be diligent and stand up for the country. We didn't do that for 8 years in this country. We diminished our military. We let people walk across the border all day long. Trump is now trying to change all of that, and he's getting attacked from all of the people on the left, the media, from the deep state, people in government, from the FBI and Department of Justice, trying to undermine his administration and get him out of office. What we're talking about here is a legitimate, full-blown civil war without the violence. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with you because I have never seen the country more divided, Mike, than it is today. There are really not many people in the middle left. You're either on the left or you're on the right. And basically the people on the right are those who love America. They love the America that was envisioned by our founding fathers and created and what they saw America, they wanted it to be. And there's on the other side, the left who is embarrassed of America, who think America needs to be brought down few notches, who think that we need to work with people in the Middle East and in Africa and in Latin America and become more like them and actually bring them into our country because they think we can actually bring them up. We can fix the thugs and the criminals and those who break our law if we just show them how nice we are and give them some money in America. It doesn't work that way. And I have to tell you what we are watching happening in California right now with the rise of Californians saying we do not want sanctuary city. We are going to fight our own state, basically, in order to protect our communities. And what you're seeing in California, I believe, is a wave that's going to start nationwide because people are feeling empowered. We at Act for America, we are behind the movement in California. We're working with our chapters. We have 39 chapters in the state of California. We are sending action alerts where people are meeting, city councils that are happening to basically protect our communities from criminals who are roaming our streets right now trying to kill us. And we're taking that wave nationwide. So no matter what state you live in or you're listening to us right now, whether on the internet or you are in Boston or anywhere else, go to our website, actforamerica.org, and join us so we can reach out to you when we start a movement like this in your state. We want to secure America, every city at a time, every state at a time, and it has to come from the grassroots. And I believe, Mike, the grassroots is finally they have had it, and they are waking up.
Well, I hope so. I'm not sure about that. I think that there is a movement of people who agree with what you're saying, what I've been saying, and they're calling this program. By the way, if you want to talk with Miss Bridget Gabriel, it's 617-266-6868. That's the number to Boston. But I'm not sure that the people understand the magnitude of this issue. I think, well, I guess there's one hopeful sign as an example. In California, with the sanctuary city lunacy and sanctuary state lunacy, there are 20 jurisdictions in California that are now saying to California, we're joining the federal government in a lawsuit against you because we're not going to do sanctuary city or county. So, yep. I mean, that's a start. And 59% of the people in California who are legitimate voters say they do not want this sanctuary city process. They want people sent back if they come in here illegally. So maybe there's that hope there. But I'm wondering whether people across this country in the middle of America, in the grassroots of America, are getting the danger to this country's very foundation, because the left would take away the Constitution if they could. I think you know that.
Oh, yes, they would if they could. And they're already trying to change the Constitution right now. As you and I are speaking, they are plotting, well, we don't need this, and we need to change this amendment, and we need to change this. They're already trying to do that. But look, the media was shocked when Donald Trump became president of the United States. They were shocked when he flipped states from basically blue to red, because we saw a wave across the country, and that was the beginning. And what you're seeing right now in California is another signal that the grassroots of America are fed up, and they are starting to get it. And you know why they're starting to get it, Mike? Because things got so bad that when we're having our people killed in the streets, when we're having criminal aliens taking money away from our children, and we are having to spend it on their health care, and we're spending it on them, putting them in jail and providing them with all the goodies in jail, including cable television, and even for the Muslims, halal meal in jail for criminals who are sitting in our jails. The American public is saying enough is enough, and they're starting to wake up. It's going to take a long time. We're not going to undo the damage that Obama did overnight. You know, we need to keep Trump in office not only for the next 3 years, but for the next 7 years in order to really be able to just correct the ship and move it around so we can continue straightening our country.
All right, what do you say about the deep state and the fact that you have the Department of Justice leaders and the FBI leaders? Many of them, I could name the names: Andrew Weissman, Andrew McCabe, who's no longer there, but certainly was part of that deep state, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Sally Yates, and I mean, go on and on about all the names who have been involved in trying to undermine this president for the very reason that he doesn't represent that deep state that wants to make the changes in this country that we're trying to resist. How do we stop these powerful agencies of government from doing that?
And powerful they are. And this is why Trump has been fighting an uphill battle for the last year. And he is fighting like no other president has ever had to fight to protect himself, his family, and the country. And now the news is coming out. Thank God at least we have Trump in office. Can you imagine if Hillary won the election? We would have never found out this stuff. Just imagine the control they would have had then. But as I'm speaking to you, I know that President Trump and his team are starting to turn the ship around, are starting to move people out, are starting to expose information. At least he is surrounding himself and nominating people like Michael Bolton and Mike Pompeo. He's finally feeling comfortable in his own surroundings. Speaking of Donald Trump, President Trump, and he is now trying to get rid of all the people who were sabotaging him, including McMaster, by the way. And we all knew that. Those of us who knew, who worked on the inside of Washington, D.C., knew exactly the shenanigans that were going on. But they're starting to come out, and the country is starting to correct them. And there is a double standard that you and I know. They treat the left in a completely different way than they treat the right. But people are waking up, and they're demanding results. And I hope the president will have enough support, at least by the people surrounding him, the strong people like Michael Bolton and many of the others who are trying to clean every department one office at a time.
Well, that has to be done, and it has to be, and as I've said here, to avoid the infiltration into the public schools of this nonsense, of this propaganda, this Professor Fraser and his book from the AP about how white Christians are just not accepting, they're bigots and racists and homophobes, Islamophobes, I mean, the whole business. You've got to have local people who believe as we do running for school boards or school committees in their local communities to change the way those schools function. I mean, that somebody called me earlier about that. People have to get involved. Isn't that ultimately the way it has to be done?
Exactly. People do have to get involved. This is why we formed grassroots chapters nationwide. And I tell my chapters, look, run for school board. You know how many people show up for school board meeting? I live in a city of 500,000 people. Do you know how many people showed up in the last election for school board and voted? 150 people. 150 people. This is how easy it is to show up and vote and flip those local positions in government, including local small, some city council things and county seats. Those little ones are so vital. You want to change the school system? Start running for school board. Get involved in chapters. Find out what's happening with the schools. Go to actforamerica.org and sign up. Either start a chapter or join a chapter. We have chapters all over the country. If there's no chapter near you, start one. Email us. We will train you. We will mentor you. I'm sure we have more than 150 people listening to us on this broadcast right now. Just imagine if you put a small group together and start looking what's happening in your community and start running to these positions and get your friends to go out and support you. You will get elected, and we will be able to take the schools back.
We'll continue with Bridget Gabriel to the top of the hour. Our number is 617-266-6868. It's participation that's going to be needed. You want to maintain the freedoms that we've had? You want to maintain the traditional nature of what we've had in this country? Then guess what? You got to get involved. 617-266-6868. By the way, the WRKO box office is now open. Be the seventh caller at 617-266-6868. Win a pair of tickets to Kid Rock with Brantley Gilbert Saturday, September 29th. That's at the Xfinity Center. For tickets and information, visit master.com at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back at it. Good to have you with us. Mike Siegel here, Bridget Gabriel with us. Let's go to your calls with Bill in Andover, first of all. Bill, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO with Bridget Gabriel. Go right ahead.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. Great show. And, Bridget, I've been listening to you for years on Fox News and saw you on Hannity, and you're doing a great job. And
Thank
I just
you.
want to tell you, you're welcome. I totally agree with what you're saying. And, Mike, I just wanted to let you know, people like me, we get out now. I'm a volunteer for Jeff Deal. I'm just grassroots. I do it on my spare time.
Good.
And the other thing that we have to really emphasize, especially to the Republicans that are supposed to be representing to us, is that you have to have the communication, because there's only Fox and OAN that are really telling the truth about what's going on. And if the Democrats and all the leftists control the communication, they're going to control the narrative, and the weak people are going to believe all the lies that they're saying. So it is happening, Mike. And Bridget, I love it. I love hearing your voice. You're such an inspiration. And people like you and me, the grassroots, we're getting out there a little at a time, but it's key with the communication, because they're experts at manipulating the conversation and twisting everything around and telling their lies to make it sound like the truth. And we can't let that happen.
I appreciate the call.
Thank you. Great point, Bill, and thank you so much for your kind words. And I want you to join us. I want you to lead a chapter for Act for America. Go to actforamerica.org. We can do so many wonderful things together. But I want to tell you something about the communication, and you have such a great point. Actually, groups of conservative organizations, conservative leaders, including me, we're going to have a press conference at the Press Club next Tuesday, which actually we had to cancel about an hour ago because of Mike Pompeo's hearing hearing next week, which is going to dominate the news. But the leaders of conservative organizations were coming together. We're working with Congress, and we are calling on the carpet Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all these people, and we are demanding transparency, and we are demanding fairness, and we are working with members of Congress right now on specifically communication, legislation, and bills, and different ways to monitor and make sure that there is fair reporting and fair communication between the left and the right in this country so the American people can get the truth. We're not going to do the press conference next week, but this is coming down the pipeline. You are the first person to know about it. And of course, our listeners.
That's going to be fantastic. Love to be part of that because the outrage of what they are doing. And the Media Research Center, as you know, Brent Bozell just came out with a 50-page report, Bridget, and they have documented that those organizations you mentioned are, in fact, monitoring and not transparently letting people speak from all sides, but suppressing conservative points of view. And Zuckerberg's 2 days of testimony was baloney. He's not doing anything to correct that problem. And that was theater. His answers, my gosh. I was watching that and I'm thinking to myself, who are you kidding? Do you think the American public is that stupid? But Brent, I work with Brent Bozell, great guy. MRC is a great organization. They are also involved with the press conference, of course. But it's happening. It's coming down the line. Well, we're going to look forward to that and look forward to bringing, and that's what has to be done. This has to be the same way the left does it. Very proactive, right. Very in your face. I've said it over and over again. Conservatives and Republicans have been too polite for too many years. It's time to get out there and be as obnoxious as the left can be. And
you know what, Mike? We don't even need to be obnoxious. We just need to show up. A lot of people sit in front of their home, they watch Fox News, they listen to talk radio, and they get frustrated, but they don't march. They don't show up to rallies. We don't do that. The left puts together a rally. They turn out 500,000 people in Washington, D.C. On the right, we put on a conference. We have to pull, teeth to get people to the conference. By the way, Act for America is having a conference September 3rd and 4th in Washington, D.C., titled Rise in Defense of Our Judeo-Christian Values and Freedom. Join us. Go to our website. Come down to Washington, D.C. for 3 days. We have 10 members of Congress at least confirmed speaking at our national conference. We have headliners, media people. Join us. Come and let your elected officials see you. March down on Washington, D.C. You will have a great party. You'll be with great patriots. Go to actforamerica.org and find out how you can get to that conference.
Thank you, Bridget. You did it perfectly. You timed it out perfectly. God bless. We'll talk soon, and thanks for being on the program today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Mike Siegel here, in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. We come back and do it one more time tomorrow. Remember, always be good to yourself and the world will be good to you.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services, cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services. The voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 100.7 WCLX HD2 Boston, an iHeart radio station.